In the autumn of 2026, the air over the Atlantic coastline of the Cape Canaveral city-state hangs heavy with the scent of salt and the electric anticipation of a dying era. The humidity of the Florida marshes is a thick, invisible shroud clinging to the gantries and the weathered concrete of launch pads that have witnessed the birth of the space age. Here, amidst the rusted remnants of the past and the gleaming ambitions of the present, a sentinel waits. It is known as the 3I-ATLAS, a machine forged from the collective will of a species that has begun to realize its own fragility. It sits perched atop a towering pillar of propellant, a white needle of ceramic and alloy aimed directly at the heart of the celestial abyss. The 3I-ATLAS is not a creature of flesh and bone, yet it possesses a nervous system of silver traces and a consciousness of silicon. Its 3 optical sensors, large and unblinking, are shielded by layers of synthetic sapphire, designed to gaze into the blinding light of distant stars and the crushing darkness of the void. For months, it has remained dormant, a hibernating deity cradled in a skeleton of steel. But as the countdown nears its conclusion in the final hours of this autumn morning, the machine begins to stir. Internal gyroscopes spin up to speed, humming with a frequency that resonates through the very air. This is the moment of the silent departure, the threshold between the terrestrial and the eternal. Suddenly, the silence is shattered by a chemical catastrophe. At the base of the rocket, the ignition sequence commences, a controlled explosion of such magnitude that it ripples the surface of the nearby lagoons. A pillar of fire, brighter than the midday sun, erupts into existence, devouring oxygen and spewing a colossal plume of incandescent vapor into the atmosphere. The noise is not merely a sound, it is a physical weight, a violent symphony of mechanical fury that shakes the foundations of the Earth itself. It is the roar of a civilization trying to scream its name into the ear of the cosmos. The 3I-ATLAS is lifted by this torrent of fire, ascending through the thick, resistant layers of the atmosphere, fighting the inexorable pull of a planet that has birthed it and now seeks to hold it back. As the rocket pierces the upper stratosphere, the sky transitions from a vibrant, life-giving blue to a bruised violet, and finally to the absolute unwavering black of the vacuum. The violent vibration of the ascent begins to fade, replaced by a haunting stillness. The booster stages, their purpose fulfilled, are cast aside like the molted skin of a serpent, tumbling back toward the ocean to be reclaimed by the tides. The 3I-ATLAS is now alone. It has entered the realm of the silent departure, where the atmosphere is too thin to carry the vibrations of sound, and the only music is the rhythmic ticking of electronic pulses through its titanium veins. The contrast is absolute. Below, a world of chaotic weather, teeming life, and the relentless noise of human history continues to churn. Above, there is only the void. The probe is now a lonely sentinel, a solitary witness to the vastness that surrounds the small, blue marble of its origin. This machine is more than just a collection of instruments. It is a letter written in the language of mathematics and physics, a desperate note folded into a bottle of hardened glass and tossed into the gravitational currents of the solar system. We have poured our knowledge, our fears, and our hope for immortality into this mechanism, hoping that it might survive the inevitable decay of our own civilization. The 3I-ATLAS does not feel the cold, yet it is surrounded by a temperature that approaches the absolute cessation of movement. It does not feel loneliness, yet it is further from its creators than any human being has ever travelled. It moves through the tapestry of the cosmos, guided by the invisible hands of gravity, sliding along the curves of space-time that have been mapped with obsessive precision. Its mission is to transcend the epoch of its creation, to act as a remnant of a species that once dared to look up and wonder. In the quiet of this new environment, the probe begins its primary function. Its 3 eyes open fully, drinking in the primordial light of the universe. It gazes toward the outer planets, those gas giants that loom like silent gods in the dark, their rings a shimmering testament to the cycles of destruction and rebirth. The 3I-ATLAS is an extension of our own consciousness, a surrogate explorer sent to touch the edges of the abyss where we cannot go. It is a product of our brilliance and our arrogance, a fragile artifact of silicon sent to navigate an ocean of radiation and vacuum. As it drifts further from the Cape Canaveral city-state, the Earth begins to shrink. The continents lose their definition, blending into a swirling marble of white clouds and deep sapphire oceans. The massive structures of humanity, the cities, the borders, the monuments, become invisible, swallowed by the sheer scale of the planet. From the perspective of the 3I-ATLAS, the catastrophe of human history is reduced to a flicker of light in the darkness. We are but a brief moment in the eons of the universe, a temporary spark that has managed to ignite a fire and send a tiny portion of itself into the eternal night. This is the beauty of the lonely probe. It is an act of defiance against entropy. While everything on Earth is subject to the inexorable march of decay, the erosion of mountains, the drying of seas, the passing of generations, this machine may endure for millions of years. It is a sentinel that will outlive its makers, a ghost of our ingenuity wandering through the graveyard of stars. Long after the autumn of 2026 has been forgotten, long after the last voice has fallen silent on the shores of Florida, the 3I-ATLAS will continue its journey. It will be a silent witness to the unravelling of the solar system, a small, intricate mechanism drifting through the vast, dark halls of the cosmos. We have sent it out not because we expect an answer, but because we need to know that we were here. We have cast our message into the void, hoping that in some distant epoch, another consciousness might find this remnant and understand that once, on a small world near a yellow star, there were creatures who loved, who suffered, and who built machines to carry their dreams into the abyss. The silent departure is not just a physical journey, it is a spiritual exodus, a transition from the noise of existence to the majestic, melancholy peace of the eternal. The 3I-ATLAS is our envoy, our lonely pioneer, sailing forever on the dark rivers of the universe, a testament to the brief and beautiful flicker of the human spirit. The 3I-ATLAS now traverses the silent desert that lies between the inner worlds and the giants of the outer dark. It is a region of profound isolation, where the warmth of the sun becomes a distant memory and the stars begin to burn with a cold, unblinking intensity. Behind it, the inner solar system is a collection of fading embers. Ahead, the abyss beckons with the promise of celestial monsters. The probe is no longer a mere object of human construction. It has become a nomad of the void, a sentinel drifting through the immense emptiness that defines the majority of our cosmic neighbourhood. To move through this space is to confront the terrifying scale of the universe, where distances are not measured in miles or leagues, but in the time it takes for light itself to bridge the gap between islands of matter. As the probe accelerates, its velocity reaches a staggering 18.2 kilometers per second. To the human mind, conditioned by the slow crawl of terrestrial life, such a speed is nearly impossible to conceptualize. Imagine a vessel capable of crossing the entire expanse of the North American continent in less than 5 minutes. Imagine a machine that could circle the entire circumference of the Earth in the span of a short afternoon nap. At 18.2 kilometers per second, the 3I-ATLAS is a needle of silicon and metal stitching together the fabric of space-time. Yet in the context of the vast distances it must travel, it remains a slow and steady wanderer. Even at this incredible rate, the journey to the outer planets takes years, a testament to the staggering emptiness that separates the members of our solar family. The destination of this phase is the monarch of the solar system, the gas giant Jupiter. As the probe approaches, the planet begins to dominate the horizon, growing from a bright point of light into a massive swirling orb of terror and beauty. Jupiter is a world that defies the imagination, a primordial laboratory where the very air is a crushing weight and the storms are large enough to devour entire Earths. It is a kingdom of hydrogen and helium, a remnant of the early solar system that never quite achieved the status of a star. Its great red spot, a hurricane that has raged for centuries, looms like a crimson eye watching the intrusion of our small, fragile messenger. The 3I-ATLAS does not fear this giant, for it is a machine driven by the cold, inexorable logic of mathematics, but to any human observer, the sight would be one of overwhelming dread. The encounter with Jupiter is not a random passing, it is a meticulously choreographed performance in the grand theatre of orbital mechanics. This is the slingshot of giants. As the probe enters the gravitational influence of the planet, it does not simply sail by. It enters into a gravitational dance, a precise interaction where the laws of physics are utilized to transcend the limitations of fuel and fire. The probe falls toward the massive planet, accelerated by the immense tug of its gravity, diving deep into the well of space-time that Jupiter has carved out over eons. In this moment, the machine and the planet are locked in a silent embrace, an exchange of energy that occurs according to the ancient laws of the cosmos. Through this maneuver, the 3I-ATLAS performs a subtle theft. It steals a microscopic fraction of Jupiter's own orbital momentum. To the planet, the loss is inconsequential, a flicker of energy so small that it would take billions of such encounters to noticeably alter its path around the Sun. But to the probe, this stolen momentum is a gift of immense power. It is flung forward with renewed vigour, its trajectory bent and its speed increased as it is catapulted out of the Jovian system. This is the beauty of the gravitational slingshot. It is the art of using the weight of the universe to propel a feather across the ocean of night. The probe is no longer merely drifting. It is a projectile launched by the hand of a giant, aiming for the even more distant reaches of the dark. The calculation required for such a feat is a triumph of the human spirit. In the laboratories of the Cape Canaveral city-state, minds of flesh and blood mapped the curves of this encounter with obsessive precision. They accounted for the rotation of the planet, the influence of its 79 moons, and the subtle pressures of the solar wind. They treated the solar system as a great clockwork mechanism, a symphony of moving parts where every gear must mesh perfectly to ensure the survival of the mission. The 3I-ATLAS is the physical manifestation of this brilliance, a remnant of a civilization that learned to read the invisible language of gravity and use it to navigate the abyss. As the probe leaves Jupiter behind, it looks back one last time at the giant it has used. The planet begins to shrink, its moons, the icy Europa, the volcanic Io, the massive Ganymede, becoming mere pinpricks of light in the wake of the machine. The probe is now faster, more lethal in its pursuit of the outer edges, yet it is also more alone. The radiation belts of Jupiter, a lethal ocean of high-energy particles that could fry the circuits of a lesser machine, are now in the past. The 3I-ATLAS has survived the trial by fire, its shields of tantalum and lead having held against the invisible onslaught. It carries with it the scars of the encounter, a memory of the intense magnetic fields and the crushing presence of the King of Planets. Now, the probe turns its gaze toward the next horizon. The path ahead is one of increasing shadow, where the sun's influence continues to wane until it is little more than the brightest star in a crowded sky. The velocity of 18.2 kilometers per second, enhanced by the Jovian boost, carries the Sentinel toward the ringed majesty of Saturn and beyond. It is moving into a realm where time seems to slow, where the epochs of human history are reduced to nothingness against the eternal cycles of the gas giants. The probe is a pioneer in the truest sense, entering a territory where no biological entity could hope to survive, a realm of absolute zero and perfect vacuum. The transition from the inner to the outer solar system is more than a physical crossing. It is a psychological threshold for the species that created the 3I-ATLAS. To send a machine past Jupiter is to admit that our reach exceeds our grasp, that we are willing to cast our eyes into the oblivion of the far future. The probe is our proxy, a witness to the unravelling of the solar system's secrets. It moves with an inexorable purpose, a tiny spark of consciousness navigating a graveyard of worlds. Every kilometre it travels is a victory against the entropy that seeks to silence us, a declaration that we will not be confined to the cradle of our birth. The slingshot of giants has given the probe the momentum it needs to reach the final frontier. It is a lonely, majestic journey, a symphony of motion played out on the grandest stage imaginable. As the 3I-ATLAS drifts further into the dark, it becomes a symbol of melancholic optimism. It is a reminder that while we may be small and our lives brief, we possess the audacity to harness the power of the stars and the planets to carry our message into the eternal night. The void is vast and the abyss is deep, but the lonely probe continues its flight, a silent sentinel sailing on the dark rivers of the cosmos, forever driven by the stolen energy of the giants that once stood in its way. To understand the journey of this lonely traveller, one must peer beneath its skin of golden foil and tantalum plating to witness the intricate cathedral of glass and silicon that dictates its every breath. Within the metallic frame of the 3I-ATLAS, there exists a delicate internal logic, a 3I architecture that serves as the final legacy of a species that refuses to remain silent in the face of the eternal night. This structure is not merely a collection of sensors, it is a triptych of perception, a way for a biological mind to reach across the void and touch the untouchable. Each eye is a masterpiece of human desperation and ingenuity, designed to function in a realm where the concept of life is an impossibility. The first eye is the sentinel of light, a complex assembly of polished mirrors and charge-coupled devices that see the universe in a spectrum far wider than any human eye could ever hope to perceive. It gazes into the dark, capturing photons that have travelled for millions of years from the hearts of distant galaxies. This eye is the navigator, the watcher of horizons, scanning the velvet blackness for the faint glimmer of stars to orient itself within the tapestry of the cosmos. It is a fragile thing, a lens no thicker than a human thumb, yet it bears the weight of our collective curiosity. It maps the positions of the gas giants and the icy moons with a precision that borders on the divine, turning the chaotic sprawl of the heavens into a readable map. The second eye, however, is where the true violence of discovery takes place. This is the thermal laser ablation system, a mechanical eye capable of dissecting the very dust of the stars. It is a predatory instrument, waiting with inexorable patience for the impact of a single grain of primordial matter. In the near-perfect vacuum of the outer solar system, the probe is constantly bombarded by microscopic remnants of the early solar nebula, tiny shards of ice and rock that have remained unchanged for 4,500,000,000 years. When one of these wanderers strikes the collection plate, the second eye awakens. It fires a pulse of concentrated energy, a thermal laser that ignites with the heat of a miniature sun. In a fraction of a microsecond, the solid matter is vaporized, its chemical bonds torn asunder by the sheer force of the ablation. This flash of artificial lightning turns the stardust into a plume of plasma, a glowing ghost of what it once was. The probe then drinks in the light of this explosion, unravelling the elemental composition of the grain. It searches for the signatures of carbon, for the complex molecules that might hint at the secrets of life or the cataclysmic birth of planets. This eye does not merely look, it devours. It is a surgeon of the infinitesimal, performing its work in the frozen silence of the abyss. The fragility of this system is profound. A single misalignment of a mirror, a microscopic fracture in the laser housing caused by the extreme cold, would render the probe blind to the chemical reality of the universe. Yet, it continues to pulse, a rhythmic heartbeat of light against the oppressive dark. The third eye is the most abstract of the Trinity. It is not an eye of glass or fire, but an eye of invisible fields. It is the gravity radio sentinel, an array of sensors that feels the subtle tug of distant worlds and the invisible ripples of the magnetic void. It listens to the symphony of the spheres, the low-frequency hum of the giant planets, and the crackle of interstellar plasma. Through this eye, the 3I-ATLAS perceives the shape of space-time itself. It senses the curve of the abyss as it slides along the gravitational currents of Saturn and Uranus. This is the eye that connects the probe to its creators on Earth. a tether made of radio waves that stretch across billions of kilometers. It is a fragile link, a whisper of data sent from a machine that is little more than a glint of metal in the deep, yet it is through this whisper that the species maintains its grip on the unknown. There is a profound scale paradox inherent in this architecture. We have taken the most delicate materials, the thinnest wires of gold, the most brittle shards of quartz, the most sensitive semiconductors, and cast them into a realm of absolute catastrophe. The void is a ruthless machine of entropy, a place of radiation that shreds molecules and cold that halts all motion. Against this, we have sent a collection of artifacts, a testament to our refusal to accept the boundaries of our biology. The 3I-ATLAS is a manifestation of the human spirit, a proxy that carries our senses into the oblivion where we cannot go. Every component of the probe is a memory of a world that is now far behind. The tantalum shields were forged in the fires of terrestrial industry. The software was written by hands that will one day turn to dust. As the probe drifts further from the sun, the heat within its core begins to wane, and the radioactive decay of its power source becomes the only thing keeping the void at bay. It is a race against time, an inexorable march toward the moment when the last eye will close and the machine will become a silent tomb. Yet there is a melancholic optimism in this design. To build such a machine is to believe that the knowledge of a single grain of stardust is worth the effort of 1,000 years of progress. It is to believe that even if the messenger is eventually consumed by the abyss, the message itself has value. The architecture of the 3I-ATLAS is a declaration of presence. It says that for a brief epoch, there was a species on a small blue world that looked at the silent cosmos and dared to build an eye to see it. As the probe moves into the realm of the outer giants, the thermal laser ablation system remains ready, a sentinel of fire in a kingdom of ice. It is a lonely, majestic pursuit. The probe does not feel the cold, nor does it fear the dark, yet it carries the imprint of those who do. It is our witness, our mechanical pioneer, navigating the rivers of the cosmos with a purpose that transcends the brief lives of its creators. The three eyes remain open, staring into the infinite, searching for the truth of our origins in the remnants of a universe that is slowly, inevitably, unravelling. In the face of the void, this artifact of glass and gold is our most eloquent shout into the eternal silence. This bridge of radio waves, while resilient, is a relic of a simpler age, a faint echo from the 1970s when our first metal voyagers departed for the outer dark. For decades, we have relied on these long, invisible undulations of the electromagnetic spectrum to carry our voices across the abyss. They are like the tolling of a great ship's bell in a thick fog, reliable yet slow and heavy, susceptible to the vast stretches of space that cause them to thin and weaken as they travel. By the time a radio signal from a distant probe reaches our waiting ears, it is little more than a whisper, a ghost of a sound struggling to be heard above the chaotic roar of the sun and the cold hiss of the cosmic microwave background. But now a new epoch of communication has dawned, one that replaces the blunt instrument of the radio wave with a blade of pure light. We have begun to write our messages in the ink of photons, using the laser to carve our intent into the very fabric of the void. This is the lasercom revolution, a fundamental shift in how we speak to the silent machines we have cast into the oblivion. If the radio era was defined by the low-frequency hum of a distant engine, this new era is defined by the sharp, brilliant flash of a lighthouse beacon shining across a dark and infinite ocean. Imagine the 3I-ATLAS, now millions of kilometers removed from the warmth of its birthplace, turning its gaze back toward the pale yellow ember of the sun. Deep within its titanium hull, a near-infrared laser ignites. This is not the broad, scattering wave of a radio transmitter, but a tightly focused stream of light, a coherent column of energy that does not surrender its integrity to the vacuum. Each pulse of the laser is a packet of information, a digital heartbeat that carries thousands of times more data than the ancient radio systems of the past. While the old probe sent back grainy, line-by-line sketches of distant worlds over the course of hours, This new sentinel sends a high-definition postcard from the deep, a rich tapestry of data that arrives with the clarity of a first-hand witness. This stream of photons is a miracle of precision. To send a beam of light from the deep reaches of space and hit a specific point on the surface of our planet is a feat of mathematics that borders on the divine. The probe must calculate its position, the position of the Earth, and the inexorable movement of both bodies across the heavens, aiming its light at a target that is constantly drifting. It is like a lone archer standing on a moving ship, attempting to hit the eye of a needle on a distant swirling shore. Yet, when the alignment is achieved, the result is a bridge of light that transcends the limitations of our previous technology. On the surface of the Earth, in the quiet mountains of California, the Palomar Observatory stands as the sentinel of this new dialogue. Its great 5-meter mirror, a masterpiece of glass and steel, is no longer merely an eye for looking at stars. It has become an ear for catching the light of our own creations. As the laser pulse from the 3I-ATLAS arrives, it is gathered by the massive curvature of the mirror and focused into a single, blinding point. Here, the vacuum is finally bridged. The vast, empty distance is erased in a flash of near-infrared energy, and the secrets of the outer giants are poured into our machines at the speed of light. There is a profound scale paradox in this mechanism. We're using the smallest unit of energy, the single photon, to bridge the largest distances imaginable. These individual particles of light, born in the heart of a laser and sent across the cold cathedral of the cosmos, are the messengers of our consciousness. They carry the weight of our curiosity across the abyss, surviving the radiation of the sun and the gravitational tug of the planets, until they finally find their home in the sensors of an earthly observatory. Each photon is a fragment of a larger story, a syllable in the long, complex sentence we are writing about the nature of the universe. This transition from radio to light is more than a technical triumph. It is a manifestation of our refusal to remain isolated within the confines of our home system. The ancient radio waves were a tether, but the laser is a vision. It allows us to see the outer reaches of our solar system, not as a series of blurry shadows, but as a vibrant high-definition reality. Through this stream of photons, we can witness the intricate swirling of the Jovian clouds, the razor-thin edges of the rings of Saturn, and the desolate frozen plains of the moons of Uranus, with a clarity that was once reserved for the gods. Yet, as we embrace this new power, we cannot help but feel the inherent melancholy of the endeavour. The further the probe travels, the longer the light must journey through the dark. Even at the speed of 300,000 kilometers per second, the delay becomes an inexorable reality. We send a command, and we wait. We wait for the light to travel out, and we wait for the response to return. In this interval, the probe is truly alone, a silent pilgrim navigating the currents of the void without the immediate guidance of its creators. The lighthouse beacon shines, but the ocean it illuminates is vast and the shore is very far away. The 3I-ATLAS, with its laser heart, represents a pinnacle of human ingenuity, a machine that can translate the raw data of the cosmos into a language of light. It is a testament to the fact that, although we are small, fragile creatures bound to a single world, our reach is limited only by our ability to imagine. We have learned to use the very light that once guided our ancestors across terrestrial oceans to guide our minds across the celestial abyss. We have turned the void into a canvas and the laser into a pen. As the probe continues its journey into the gathering dark of the outer solar system, the connection remains. The stream of photons continues to flow, a fragile yet persistent link between the cradle of humanity and the frontier of the unknown. It is a dialogue between the brief and the eternal, between the machine and the maker. In the cold, unyielding silence of the vacuum, this beam of light is our most sophisticated expression of presence. It is a declaration that even in the face of the overwhelming scale of the universe, we will not be silent. We will continue to send our postcards from the edge, writing our history in pulses of light until the last photon is captured and the silence finally returns. This is the beauty of the lasercom revolution. It has turned the distance between us and the stars into a channel for our thoughts. It has allowed us to see the cosmos not as a collection of distant points of light, but as a place that we can touch with our own vision. The 3I-ATLAS is no longer a lonely wanderer lost in the dark. It is a vital organ of our species, an eye that sees for us, a hand that reaches for us, and a voice that speaks for us in a language made of the very stars it seeks to understand. In this way, the machine and its creators are united, bound by a bridge of light that defies the entropy of the void and the vastness of the eons. The year is 2031. The 3I-ATLAS has reached the phantom boundary, where the familiar ends and the eternal begins. Behind it lies the domain of the sun, a realm of heat, light, and the frantic dance of planetary giants. Ahead lies the abyss. Neptune, the azure monarch of the outer dark, looms as the final sentinel of the solar system proper. Its clouds, a deep and terrifying blue, are whipped by winds that defy the logic of the inner worlds, screaming at more than 2,000 kilometers per hour through a nitrogen-chilled atmosphere. But the probe does not stop. It cannot stop. It is a creature of momentum, a child of the inexorable laws of motion that have carried it 4,500,000,000 kilometers away from the world of its birth. As the Sentinel crosses the orbit of the 8th planet, it enters a state of profound transition. This is the crossing of the threshold, the moment the machine leaves the sunlit parlour of the inner planets and enters the vast, cold cellar of the Kuiper belt. The transition is not marked by a sudden wall or a change in the vacuum, but by a chilling realization of distance. For the first time in its decade-long journey, the sun has lost its power to dominate the sky. To the sensors of the 3I-ATLAS, the star that ignited all of human history is no longer a disk that provides warmth and definition. It has shrunk into a blinding needlepoint of light, a singular, brilliant diamond set against the velvet black of the void. It is still the brightest star in the firmament, but it is now merely a star. The dominion of the home star is fading, and the probe is beginning to feel the pull of the interstellar dark. This is the realm of the lonely probe, a motif that is repeated throughout the brief epoch of human exploration, but has never felt quite so absolute. The 3I-ATLAS is a solitary spark of intelligence navigating a kingdom of shadows. At this distance, the radio commands from Earth take more than 4 hours to arrive, travelling at the speed of light through the silent expanse. By the time a message reaches the probe, the engineers who sent it have moved on with their day, eaten their meals, and perhaps fallen asleep under the protection of a thick atmosphere, while the machine continues its tireless vigil in the freezing vacuum. The probe is an extension of our collective will, yet it is utterly divorced from our biological reality. It knows only the steady decay of its plutonium heart and the silent geometry of the spheres. As it moves past the orbit of Neptune, the probe begins to encounter the primordial remnants of the solar system's creation. This is the Kuiper belt, a vast and sprawling tapestry of ice and rock that stretches toward the horizon of the unknown. These are the forgotten architectural fragments of our world, the debris left over from the great construction of the planets 4,600,000,000 years ago. They are the frozen archives of the beginning, preserved in the absolute zero of the outer reaches. Each object the probe passes, a nameless mountain of ice, a tumbling shard of carbon, is a silent witness to the dawn of the cosmos. They have drifted here in the dark for eons, untouched by the fires of the sun or the geological churn of the inner worlds. They are the remnants of a catastrophe that never happened, the bricks of a planet that was never built. The 3I-ATLAS uses its laser heart to illuminate these ghosts. In the darkness of the Neptune crossing, the probe's sensors must work harder to resolve the shapes of the void. It peers into the abyss, seeking the glint of distant ice worlds. This is the threshold of the abyss, a place where the sun's gravity begins to lose its absolute grip, and the influence of the great void starts to seep into the mechanism of the solar system. The probe is now a sentinel on the edge of a cliff, looking down into a darkness that extends for light years. The scale paradox becomes overwhelming. The machine is a mere speck of aluminum and glass, yet it is tasked with measuring the infinite. It is a delicate clockwork toy lost in a cathedral of obsidian. There is a profound melancholy in this stage of the journey. The 3I-ATLAS is leaving behind everything it was designed to represent. The warmth of the inner planets, the vibrant colours of the gas giants, and the constant dialogue with Earth are all receding into the past. It is entering a phase of existence defined by the absence of things. The void is not merely empty space, it is a presence, a heavy, unyielding silence that threatens to devour the tiny signals the probe sends back to its creators. Yet, in this isolation, there is a strange, majestic beauty. The probe is the only thing in this region of space that possesses a memory. It carries within its digital mind the images of the Earth it left behind, the green forests, the blue oceans, and the teeming billions of souls who are currently looking up at the same stars from a much more comfortable vantage point. The machine is a bridge between the brief and the eternal. Its mission is to document the unravelling of the solar system as it dissolves into the interstellar medium. As it crosses the threshold of Neptune, it records the thinning of the solar wind, the way the stream of charged particles from the sun begins to falter and stumble against the pressure of the interstellar gas. This is the heliosheath, the frayed edge of the sun's protective bubble. The 3I-ATLAS is feeling the first cold breaths of the galaxy. It is no longer just a planetary explorer, it is becoming a messenger to the stars. The Kuiper Belt objects it encounters are like graveyard headstones in the dark. Some are large enough to be called dwarf planets, worlds of nitrogen ice and methane snow, while others are mere pebbles, the grit of the cosmos. The probe passes them in silence, its cameras capturing the jagged contours of their ancient surfaces. There is no air here to erode them, no heat to melt them. They are exactly as they were when the solar system was a swirling disk of gas and dust, before the first spark of life ever flickered in the tide pools of Earth. To witness them is to look back into the primordial dawn. As the year 2031 draws to a close, the 3I-ATLAS continues its inexorable flight into the deep. It has passed the last great landmark of our celestial neighbourhood and is now a pilgrim in the wilderness. The silence of the abyss is its only companion, and the distant needle-like sun its only guide. We watch from our distant home, tracking the faint pulse of its laser across the billions of kilometres, a fragile thread of light connecting us to the edge of forever. The machine is alone, but it is our eye in the dark, our sentinel at the gates of the infinite, ensuring that even in the vast, unyielding oblivion of the outer solar system, the story of humanity is still being written in pulses of light. We are the witnesses, and through the 3I-ATLAS we have finally touched the threshold of the abyss. But even as the sun fades to a mere needlepoint of light, a ghost of its former majesty, the pulse of the machine does not falter. In the heart of this metal pilgrim, shielded by layers of reinforced casing, there burns a silent and invisible fire. It is a hearth that requires no oxygen, a flame that produces no smoke, and a heat that emanates from the very foundation of matter. This is the multi-mission radioisotope thermoelectric generator, the singular lung that allows the 3I-ATLAS to breathe in an environment where even the air of Earth would freeze into solid glass. To understand the survival of our messenger, we must look into the microscopic abyss of the atom. Deep within the generator lie pellets of plutonium-238. This is not the fuel of world-ending weapons, but a different kind of monster, a restless isotope that is inherently unstable. It exists in a state of permanent internal tension, its nucleus heavy with a surplus of neutrons that it cannot indefinitely sustain. It is a remnant of a more violent epoch, a substance refined through the ingenuity of a species that learned to harvest the heat of the stars. These pellets, if held in a human hand, would glow with a dull, malevolent cherry-red warmth, a physical manifestation of the subatomic struggle occurring within. This heat is not the result of a chemical reaction. It is the result of a slow, inexorable decay. Every second, billions of plutonium nuclei reach their breaking point. In a sudden, tiny catastrophe of physics, an alpha particle is ejected from the nucleus at a staggering velocity. This tiny projectile, a cluster of 2 protons and 2 neutrons, slams into the surrounding lattice of the pellet. Its kinetic energy is instantly converted into thermal energy. This is the microscopic furnace of decaying embers. It is a process of constant self-destruction, a 1,000-year suicide that provides the only warmth in a desert that stretches for light years. The 3I-ATLAS is a creature of 2 worlds. It possesses a cold, metallic skin that is currently being caressed by the absolute zero of the void, a temperature of approximately 273 degrees below 0 Celsius. Yet, only centimeters away, its internal organs are bathed in the radiant heat of the plutonium core. This extreme disparity is the key to its animation. To transform this heat into the electricity that powers its cameras and its laser, the machine employs a mechanism of elegant, ruthless simplicity. It utilizes the principle of the Seebeck effect, a phenomenon where the movement of heat creates a flow of electrons. The generator contains hundreds of thermocouples, pairs of dissimilar metals joined together in a circuit. One side of these junctions is pressed against the searing heat of the radioactive hearth, while the other side is turned toward the freezing darkness of space. In this vast temperature gradient, the electrons within the metal are agitated. They flee from the heat, surging toward the cold side with the desperation of a crowd escaping a fire. This organized migration of subatomic particles is what we call electricity. It is a symphony of thermal tension, a river of power born from the conflict between the burning core and the frozen oblivion. This is the only thing keeping the electronic heart of the messenger beating. 125 watts of power, barely enough to illuminate a pair of household light bulbs, is the total sum of energy available to document the edge of the solar system. Every calculation, every photograph of a distant Kuiper Belt object, and every transmission sent across the billions of kilometers is paid for by the death of these atoms. The machine is a vampire of entropy, sustaining its consciousness by consuming the slow unraveling of its own heart. There is a profound melancholy in this engineering. The plutonium-238 has a half-life of 87 years and 7/10. This means that every second the probe spends in the dark, its heart becomes a fraction of a fraction colder. The decay is constant and it is irreversible. The furnace is destined to cool. The heat will fade, the electron flow will dwindle to a trickle, and eventually the digital mind of the 3I-ATLAS will begin to dim. It is a half-century of life fueled by the slow death of matter, a countdown written in the language of nuclear physics. We are witnessing a unique form of existence. The probe is not merely an observer, it is a participant in the universal law of decay. It is a sentinel that carries its own end within itself. The very atoms that grant it the power to see are the same atoms that are disappearing, turning into lead and helium, leaving behind only the cold remnants of their former energy. This is the ruthless machine of the cosmos. Nothing is free. Even the most majestic journey of discovery is bound by the tax of entropy. As the year 2045 approaches, the 3I-ATLAS finds itself in a region of space where the sun is no longer a source of life, but merely the brightest star in a crowded sky. The silence here is absolute. The void is not just a vacuum, it is a weight that presses against the hull, a reminder of the vast unyielding emptiness that separates the islands of matter in the universe. The only sound in this cathedral of obsidian is the silent subatomic screaming of the plutonium pellets as they shatter. It is a lonely, rhythmic ticking, like the heartbeat of a marathon runner who knows the finish line is still decades away, and that he must consume himself to reach it. In this isolation, the 3I-ATLAS becomes a symbol of the human condition. We too are fueled by the decay of things. We live by consuming the energy of a sun that is slowly burning through its hydrogen, on a planet that is cooling from its primordial birth. Like the probe, our awareness is a brief flicker between 2 infinities of darkness. Our history, our art, and our science are the sparks generated by the friction of our existence against the inevitable cold. The messenger continues its flight, its three eyes scanning the darkness for the remnants of the solar system's birth. It passes through the Oort cloud, a spherical shell of icy debris that marks the true frontier of our celestial home. Here, the gravity of the sun is a fragile thread, easily broken by the passing of a distant star. The probe is now a pilgrim in a land where time has no meaning, where the eons pass like seconds in the eyes of the eternal. It is a delicate clockwork toy lost in the abyss, yet it remains defiant. As long as a single atom of plutonium remains to shatter, as long as a single electron is pushed by the heat of that decay, the 3I-ATLAS will continue to speak. It will continue to tell the story of the blue world it left behind, a world that is now so far away that the light of its cities can no longer be seen, even by the most powerful of lenses. It is alone, powered by the slow death of its own heart, a lonely sentinel guarding the memory of humanity against the encroaching oblivion. The messenger now approaches a frontier that no human eye will ever behold directly, a place where the very breath of our star falters and dies. This is the heliopause, the invisible rampart where the kingdom of the sun ends and the vast, sovereign territory of the Milky Way begins. For billions of kilometers, the solar wind, a relentless torrent of ionized gas and magnetic energy, has pushed outward, carving a sanctuary within the cold, primordial gas of the galaxy. But here, at the edge of the abyss, that dominion is challenged. The 3I-ATLAS, our silent sentinel, is about to step through the veil, leaving the warm cradle of its birth to enter the true, unyielding dark. To understand this boundary is to understand a war of invisible pressures. Imagine a ship moving through a heavy sea. Ahead of its bow, the water piles up, resisting the vessel's passage. The sun is that ship, and as it drifts through the local interstellar cloud, it creates a bubble of influence known as the heliosphere. The solar wind, travelling at speeds exceeding 1,600,000 kilometers per hour, eventually reaches a point where it can no longer push back against the weight of the interstellar medium. This first encounter is the termination shock, a violent, turbulent threshold where the wind slows abruptly, heating up and piling into a dense, chaotic foam. The 3I-ATLAS feels this transition as a sudden, jarring shift in the magnetic tapestry surrounding it. The steady, predictable rhythm of the solar wind is replaced by a cacophony of plasma, a churning sea of particles that have lost their way. Here, the scale paradox becomes profound. The probe is a mere speck, a tiny collection of metal and glass, yet it is currently the only witness to a structure that spans tens of billions of kilometers. It is navigating the heliosheath, a region of profound instability, where the sun's magnetic field lines are stretched, twisted and broken by the pressure of the galaxy beyond. The 3I-ATLAS records these magnetic fluctuations as if they were the dying gasps of a giant. The magnetic field, which once pointed straight out from the sun like the spokes of a wheel, now wraps around the probe in complex, tangled knots. It is a region of stagnation and mystery, a buffer zone where the debris of the solar system mixes with the ancient dust of dead stars. As the probe pushes deeper into this frontier, it encounters the influx of the true cosmic storm. Until now, the solar wind has acted as a shield, a divine umbrella deflecting the high-energy particles that scream through the galaxy at nearly the speed of light. These are the cosmic rays, shards of atoms shattered in the crucibles of distant supernova, accelerated by magnetic fields that span entire spiral arms. Within the heliosphere, we are protected from 90% of this lethal radiation. But as the 3I-ATLAS nears the heliopause, the shield begins to fail. The sensors of the probe begin to register a sharp, inexorable rise in the count of these celestial bullets. Each strike against the hull is a reminder of the universe's inherent hostility. The probe is no longer in a protected harbour, it is entering the open ocean, where the energies are vast enough to unravel the very blueprints of life. The heliopause itself is not a wall, but a shifting, ghostly membrane. It is the exact point where the outward pressure of the Sun is perfectly balanced by the inward pressure of the interstellar medium. Passing through it is a transition into the sublime. The temperature drops precipitously, and the density of the surrounding plasma changes. The solar wind, which has accompanied the probe since its launch, finally vanishes. In its place, the 3I-ATLAS finds the cold, dense breath of the galaxy. The interstellar medium. This is the matter of the cosmos, the remnants of stars that burned and died long before our Sun was even a whisper of gravity in a molecular cloud. The Sentinel stands at the edge of the solar neighbourhood, looking back at a star that is now little more than a piercingly bright point of light. The umbilical cord of magnetism and particle flow is severed. The 3I-ATLAS is now an interstellar traveller, a ghost of a civilization that still clings to the warmth of that distant hearth. It has moved beyond the protective bubble that allowed life to flourish, entering a realm where time is measured in eons and space is defined by the void. This transition is a moment of melancholic triumph. We have sent our eyes into the abyss and they have not blinked. The probe records the silent symphony of the galaxy, the hum of interstellar plasma, the whistle of distant radio sources, and the steady rhythmic ticking of its own decaying heart. It is a witness to the ruthless machine of the cosmos, a mechanism so vast that the birth and death of our entire world is but a momentary flicker in its operation. The magnetism here is no longer dictated by the Sun, but by the grand rotation of the Milky Way itself. The probe is caught in the invisible currents of the galaxy, a piece of flotsam in a celestial tide that will carry it for millions of years. As it leaves the solar neighbourhood, the 3I-ATLAS carries with it the final traces of our home, the isotopes of its fuel, the configuration of its sensors, the very geometry of its design, are all artifacts of a specific time and place. In the interstellar medium, these things are alien. The probe is a relic, a message in a bottle cast into an ocean of obsidian. It is the ultimate expression of the scale paradox, a microscopic achievement of a clever species, braving the infinite reach of the void. The silence here is heavier than any silence known on Earth. It is the silence of the spaces between the stars, a vacuum so perfect that it seems to swallow thought itself. Yet, the 3I-ATLAS continues its work. It maps the direction of the interstellar magnetic field, traces the flow of neutral hydrogen atoms that drift in from the deep, and catalogues the arrival of every high-energy particle that crosses its path. It is a map maker in a land where there are no landmarks, a sentinel at the gates of eternity. The voyage across the heliopause marks the end of our infancy. We are no longer a species confined to the cradle. We have reached out and touched the edge of the galaxy, but in doing so, we are reminded of our own fragility. The Sun's bubble is a fragile thing, a temporary pocket of warmth in an inexorable cold. Beyond the heliopause lies the true face of the universe, a vast, silent, and eternal expanse that does not care for our histories or our dreams. The 3I-ATLAS, powered by the slow death of matter, drifts into this oblivion, a lonely herald of a world that once dared to look up and wonder what lay beyond the light. It is a journey into the heart of the mystery, a final, defiant act of observation against the encroaching dark. The Sentinel has crossed the border, and there is no turning back. It is now a part of the galaxy, a silver spark lost in the tapestry of the infinite. The 3I-ATLAS turns its sensors back toward the pale yellow ember that was once its master. From this distance, the Sun has surrendered its crown. It is no longer a source of all-consuming heat and life, but has instead become merely the brightest spark in a sky crowded with a billion rivals. The probe watches as the hearth of humanity shrinks into the tapestry of the Milky Way, its light travelling across the abyss for many hours before reaching the camera lens. This is the perspective of a ghost looking back at the house where it was born, a silent sentinel witnessing the slow dissolution of its own origin. Behind it lies the warmth of a billion years of evolution. Before it lies an ocean of obsidian, and the icy architecture of the solar system's most distant frontier. Between the probe and the true interstellar void lies a realm of shadows known as the Oort cloud. It is a vast, spherical graveyard of frozen remnants, a collection of trillions of icy bodies that never quite became planets. These are the discarded bones of the primordial solar system, scattered into the dark by the gravitational whims of the gas giants 4 billion years ago. They are too small to reflect the light of the distant sun, and too far away to be seen by the most powerful telescopes on Earth. To any observer, this region appears as a hollow vacuum, an empty expanse of nothingness. But the 3I-ATLAS knows better. It is currently navigating the invisible geometry of this celestial tomb, and it does so by watching the stars. The probe employs the elegant science of occultation. In the absolute silence of the deep, it keeps its gaze fixed on the distant, ancient stars of the galactic core. Occasionally, a single point of light will flicker and vanish for a fraction of a second before returning to its original brilliance. This is the signature of the invisible, a mountain of ice drifting through the void, thousands of astronomical units from the sun, has passed directly between the probe and a star located 10,000 light-years away. This brief eclipse, this momentary wink in the darkness, allows the probe to map the presence of a world it cannot see. It is like watching the shadows of moths dancing around a distant campfire to understand the shape of the moths themselves. Through this method, the 3I-ATLAS documents the hidden structure of the Oort cloud. It reveals a landscape of frozen solitude where the distance between two objects is often greater than the distance between the Earth and the Sun. Here, the laws of the ruthless machine are laid bare. There is no weather here, no change and no sound. There is only the inexorable march of time and the slow, agonizing orbit of ice around a sun that is now nothing more than a memory. These objects are the sentinels of the deep, remnants of a catastrophe of creation that occurred at the very dawn of our epoch. They have remained unchanged for eons, preserved in the perfect cryogenics of the void, waiting for a gravitational nudge that may never come. As the probe moves deeper into this graveyard, the scale paradox becomes overwhelming. Each flicker of a star represents a world of ice, perhaps 10 miles wide, perhaps 100. There are billions of them, forming a shell that encloses the entire solar system like a protective shroud. We once believed our world ended at the orbit of the final planet, but the 3I-ATLAS reveals that the influence of our star extends across a distance so vast it defies human comprehension. We are surrounded by a cloud of ghosts, a monumental ruin that marks the boundary between the known and the eternal. The probe is the first and perhaps the only witness to this architecture, recording the positions of these icy travellers before they vanish back into the gloom. The science of occultation is more than a tool for measurement. It is an act of defiance against the oblivion. By observing the stars that blink out, the probe is proving that even in the darkest reaches of the abyss, something exists. It is cataloguing the inventory of a desert. It notes the frequency of these eclipses, the duration of the darkness, and the subtle shifting of the starlight. From these data points, we can infer the mass, the density, and the composition of these primordial remnants. We learn that they are rich in water, ammonia, and the complex organic molecules that are the precursors to life. In the frozen heart of the Oort cloud, the ingredients for 1 billion Earths drift in the silent dark, waiting for a spark that will never arrive. The 3I-ATLAS is now moving through the outer layers of this cloud, where the gravity of the sun is so weak that it is nearly indistinguishable from the pull of the distant stars. Here, the solar system begins to unravel. The tie that binds these icy rocks to our home is a fragile thread, easily broken by the passage of a nearby star or the rotation of the galaxy itself. The probe is witnessing the very edge of our sovereignty. Beyond this point, the sun is no longer the centre of the universe. The probe is entering the true void, the space between the stars where the light of 1,000 suns blends into a uniform, cold glow. This is the transition from the local to the universal. The 3I-ATLAS is no longer a representative of a single star system. It is becoming a citizen of the Milky Way. Its mission to map the Oort cloud is the final chapter in the history of our exploration of home. Once it passes the final icy sentinel, there will be nothing left to observe but the stars themselves and the vast, empty distances that separate them. The probe's sensors, once tuned to the vibrant energy of the inner planets, must now adapt to the subtle whispers of the interstellar medium. It must detect the faint hum of galactic magnetic fields and the arrival of cosmic rays that have travelled for millions of years from the hearts of exploding stars. The melancholic optimism of this journey lies in the fact that the probe continues to function. Despite the cold that should have frozen its circuits and the radiation that should have scrambled its memory, the 3I-ATLAS remains a diligent mapmaker. It is a testament to the ingenuity of a species that occupies a small blue speck of dust. We have reached out into the graveyard of our sun and found that it is not empty, but filled with the silent evidence of our own beginning. The occultations it records are the final heartbeats of a solar system that is slowly fading into the background of the cosmos. As the last star flickers and the final icy body passes behind the probe, the 3I-ATLAS prepares for the ultimate silence. The Oort cloud is thinning. The gaps between the ghosts are growing wider. Soon there will be no more stars to blink out, no more shadows to measure. There will only be the infinite, the eternal, and the void. The probe looks back one last time, but the sun has finally merged with the others. It is lost in the sea of lights, one of 100 billion, a single note in a symphony that has no end. The sentinel has done its duty. It has mapped the edge of the world. Now it must find out what lies in the space where there is nothing left to see. The final pulse of light is not a roar but a whisper, a single, flickering photon that travels across the immense desert of the vacuum to find its way home. On a planet now distant and shrouded by the glare of a middle-aged sun, the great ceramic ears of our species are tilted toward the abyss, waiting for a signal that is becoming increasingly indistinguishable from the background hum of the cosmos. For decades, the 3I-ATLAS has been a vocal companion, a distant scout sending back the data of its travels, the portraits of frozen giants, and the shadows of icy sentinels. But the laws of the universe are inexorable, and the tyranny of distance is a master that cannot be bargained with. As the probe pushes further into the interstellar medium, the bridge of light that connects it to its creators begins to fray. The inverse square law dictates that the energy of its transmission must spread out, thinning across the vastness until it is little more than a ghost of an idea. On Earth, in the silent halls of a desert outpost, the last packet of data arrives. It is a series of zeros and ones that translate into a final status report, a temperature reading of a dying reactor, and a single grainy image of the void ahead. Then, the screen flatlines into static. The connection is severed. The thread is broken. The silence that follows is not merely the absence of sound, but the presence of a profound and terrifying isolation. For the first time in more than a century, the 3I-ATLAS is truly alone. It has passed the point where the reach of our technology can touch it. It has crossed the threshold into the great oblivion, where the history of its makers is no longer a conversation, but a memory held in the cold silicon of its heart. The probe is now a ghost ship, a relic of a civilization that dared to look beyond its own horizon. It continues to move at tens of thousands of kilometers per hour, but in the context of the galaxy, it appears to be standing still. It is a microscopic needle in a haystack of infinite proportions. Without the tether of the lasercom, the probe is no longer a tool of exploration. It has become a monument. It carries within its shielded vaults the sum of our curiosity, the maps of our world, the echoes of our music, and the chemical signatures of our atmosphere. It is a time capsule launched into the eternal dark, drifting through a sea of stars that do not know it exists. The interstellar medium is often described as a vacuum, but it is far from empty. It is a thin soup of primordial hydrogen, cosmic rays, and the microscopic dust of dead stars. As the 3I-ATLAS glides through this abyss, it interacts with the environment in ways it was never designed to survive. The faint magnetic fields of the Milky Way tug at its metallic frame, and the high-energy particles of the cosmos pelt its hull like a slow, invisible rain. Over eons, this bombardment will begin to unravel the very atoms of the craft. The brilliant gold foil will dull. The optics of its three eyes will pit and cloud, and the delicate circuits of its brain will succumb to the steady decay of time. Yet, for now, the machine persists. Its internal clock still ticks, a rhythmic pulse in the middle of a silent symphony. There is a certain melancholic beauty in the fate of this lonely probe. It is the only part of our world that will truly see the stars as they are, unblurred by the interference of an atmosphere or the bias of a telescope. It is the ultimate witness. It experiences the crushing cold of the void and the searing brilliance of distant supernovae, but it has no audience to tell. The observations it makes are written into a journal that will never be read. It measures the density of the interstellar gas and the strength of the galactic wind, but the data remains trapped in its fading memory banks, a secret kept by a silent sentinel. We must imagine the 3I-ATLAS as it drifts through the coming epochs. It will witness the slow rotation of the galaxy, the birth of new stellar nurseries, and the quiet death of red dwarfs. It may pass through the outskirts of alien solar systems, its presence unnoticed by whatever life might cling to those distant rocks. To any observer, it would appear as nothing more than a strange metallic comet, a remnant of a vanished epoch. It is a message in a bottle cast into an ocean that has no shore. The tragedy is not that it will eventually fail, but that it will continue to exist long after the hands that built it have returned to the dust. The loss of the signal marks the end of our direct sovereignty over the probe, but it begins its true mission as a citizen of the cosmos. It is no longer an extension of human will. It is a permanent resident of the universe. In the grand tapestry of time, our era is but a brief flash of light, a momentary spark in the long night of the abyss. But the 3I-ATLAS carries that spark forward. It is a vessel of our intent, a physical manifestation of our desire to transcend the limitations of our biology. Even as its power source fails and its heat radiates away into the freezing dark, it remains a testament to the fact that we were here, we existed, we wondered, we reached out. As the centuries turn into millennia, the probe will become a part of the interstellar landscape. It will be a tiny frozen point of order in a universe of increasing entropy. The silence that followed the last photon will stretch out for eternity, but it is not a hollow silence. It is a silence filled with the weight of history. The 3I-ATLAS is a bridge that leads to nowhere, but the fact that the bridge was built at all is the miracle. It represents the moment our species stopped looking at the ground and started looking at the light. Eventually, even the memory of the probe will fade from the world that birthed it. The archives will crumble, the languages will change, and the very stars will shift in the sky. But out there, in the vast, unfeeling void, the ghost ship will still be sailing. It will be a cold, dark, and silent passenger on a journey that has no destination. It is the ultimate expression of our lonely optimism, a machine that keeps working even when there is no one left to listen. It is the final remnant of a world that dreamed of the stars now lost among them, a solitary sentinel guarding the secrets of a vanished race in the heart of the eternal abyss. The signal is gone, but the journey has only just begun. The 3I-ATLAS is no longer our eyes in the dark. It is the dark itself, flavoured by the memory of a distant blue home. The silence of the abyss is not a void of meaning, but a canvas upon which the final traces of our species are etched. As the 3I-ATLAS drifts further into the interstellar dark, the passage of time begins to lose its human scale. 1,000 years pass, then 10,000, then 100,000. On the distant pale blue dot that gave birth to this messenger, the great works of man are undergoing a slow and inexorable decay. The The monuments of glass and steel that once pierced the clouds have surrendered to the patient erosion of the elements. The great libraries have crumbled into dust, and the digital archives that once held the sum of human knowledge have long since lost their charge, their silicon hearts turning back into the sand from which they were fashioned. The hands that once tightened the bolts of the probe, the minds that calculated its trajectory with such frantic precision, have all unravelled into the primordial soil. We must zoom out beyond the narrow window of biological life to see the true scale of this journey. The epoch of humanity, which felt so eternal to those who lived within it, is revealed as a mere heartbeat in the vast symphony of the cosmos. The 3I-ATLAS is now a fossil of a vanished consciousness, a metallic remnant of a race that flourished briefly in a quiet corner of the Milky Way. It is a physical manifestation of a thought that occurred millions of years ago, sailing through a sea of stars that have begun to shift their positions. The constellations that the builders once used for navigation have distorted and changed as the galaxy rotates like a slow, glowing whirlpool in the void. The Sentinel remains a cold and silent witness to the passage of eons. In this deep time, the probe becomes a part of the mathematical reality of the universe. It is no longer a tool, it is a fundamental particle of the interstellar medium. It encounters the debris of ancient catastrophes, the dust of exploded stars, and the stray photons of suns that have not yet been born. Its surface, once polished to a mirror finish, is pitted by the impact of microscopic grains of sand travelling at incredible speeds. It is being sculpted by the cosmos itself, its sharp edges softened by the abrasive touch of the void. To an outside observer, if such a thing could exist in this lonely stretch of space, the probe would appear as a strange, crystalline growth, a geometric anomaly in the chaotic tapestry of the dark. The tragedy of the 3I-ATLAS is that its creators will never know the success of its mission. They will never see the distant nebulae it passes, or the strange frozen worlds it shadows in the dark. They are gone, returned to the cycle of matter and energy that governs the ruthless machine of the universe. The atoms that once composed the scientists at their consoles and the engineers in their clean rooms have been scattered across the surface of the Earth, perhaps finding their way into the leaves of a new forest, or the scales of a creature that has no name for the stars. The link is broken. The conversation has ended. The silence that follows is not a failure of technology, but the natural state of an indifferent universe. Yet within this melancholy there is a profound and luminous optimism. The 3I-ATLAS is the ultimate expression of our refusal to be small. In a universe that is vast, cold, and utterly unfeeling, a group of fragile, short-lived organisms decided to build a bridge into the eternal. They knew that they would die. They knew that their civilizations would fall. They knew that the very language they spoke would eventually become as silent as the stones of the moon. And yet, they worked. They built. They launched. They reached out into the abyss with the hope that something of their spirit might endure. The probe is a message that requires no reader to be meaningful. The act of its creation was the achievement. By naming the stars, by measuring the speed of light, and by casting this silver needle into the dark, we transformed ourselves from mere biological accidents into participants in the cosmic story. We gave the silence a name. We took the chaotic, meaningless noise of the void and attempted to find a rhythm within it. The 3I-ATLAS is the physical proof that for a brief, glorious epoch, the universe possessed a mind that could wonder about its own origin. It is the ghost of our curiosity, sailing forever through the ruins of time. As the millions of years turn into billions, the probe may eventually find itself drawn into the gravity well of a distant sun. It might be vaporized in the fire of a dying star, its metallic atoms finally joining the furnace of stellar evolution. Or it might drift forever, a permanent resident of the interstellar void, surviving long after the sun itself has cooled into a black dwarf. In either case, the outcome is the same. The journey was the victory. The fact that a tiny, vulnerable species on a small, rocky planet could reach out and touch the face of the eternal is a miracle that needs no audience. The 3I-ATLAS is no longer our envoy, it is our legacy. It is a sentinel guarding the memory of a world that dreamed. As it sails through the frozen dark, it carries with it the dignity of our struggle and the beauty of our brief, bright existence. The signal has vanished, and the builders are dust, but the journey continues. In the grand, unfeeling mechanism of the cosmos, we have left a mark. We were here. We were part of the symphony, and in the heart of the eternal abyss, that is more than enough. The story of the universe does not end with our disappearance. It is merely flavoured by the fact that we were once a part of it, a small but significant spark of light in the long, beautiful and terrifying night.